Welcome to Delightful Dissent. It's episode 49 today, and I'm talking to Marianne Powell, poet, songwriter, and coach. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Matthew. Yeah, really nice to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And today we're going to be talking about the assumption that it's irresponsible to enjoy yourself. And I think this is a really interesting one. There's always a voice in my head when I'm having fun telling me that I should be doing something else. Even when I'm doing something productive and fun, which is even weirder. But it's definitely a thing, and I'm really looking forward to exploring this a bit more with you. So yeah, but if you happen to be new to Delightful Dissent, it's a show that really came up from my work with people pioneering new approaches and trying new approaches to complex problems and to the difficult, more tangled things. And Marianne is very much one of those people. And I found when people were doing that, we often kind of hit on these hidden barriers and these kind of implicit beliefs and the deeper assumptions that really didn't get much examination, but were just kind of there. And I wanted to challenge those and see how true they were and whether we could do something with them. So I hope this show gives you some specific ideas for your personal or professional life about the kind of assumption that we're talking about today. But perhaps more importantly, I hope it gives you ideas about how you can go out there and tackle some of those assumptions, challenge some of those things yourself. And it's called Delightful Dissent because, yeah, we are saying, okay, yeah, kind of disagree on this one, but it's not about kind of winning, proving ourselves completely right and everyone else wrong. It's also not kind of quite so serious in that sense. It's about being a bit playful with what could be and with possibilities and seeing if there are any different and more enjoyable ways of engaging with whatever it is that we are doing. And this show is genuinely live, so please do bear with us if there are any technical issues or any pets as a possibility. And please be aware that we might be talking about challenging and personal topics during the show, so there might be difficult things coming up for you. Also, that we may use strong language. So if either of those are an issue for you, then please just be warned that that's a possibility. There aren't any perfect answers here. This is really about exploring and asking questions, and that's what we're going to be doing as well. But it's about asking questions of yourself and about asking questions of us. So if you're watching live, then please do comment and ask questions there, and we'll be able to bring those comments in and make them part of the conversation. If you are listening to or watching the recording, then we will share information about how to get in touch with either of us and continue the conversation at the end of the show. So, yeah, I first met Marianne a little while back, actually, but we didn't really kind of have a chance to have a really good conversation until a bit more recently. And we were both on a show hosted by another previous guest, Craig Roberts, and got kind of chatting a bit more about stuff. But I was really struck, I think, by Marianne's kind of quite a gentle, joyful approach to dealing with some quite profound stuff that can feel heavy in other situations. So I think it was a really lovely kind of thing that I really wanted to have on the show and a feel for something to share. So yeah, but could I ask you to introduce yourself a little bit, please? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that intro. I feel like I'm going to take what you just said and put it on LinkedIn somewhere. So thank you. Yeah, let me introduce myself. It's a funny thing to introduce myself at the minute because I'm kind of going through a little bit of a kind of career transition. But so my background is in writing. I've always sort of for a long time, I've been a professional writer in various different guises for various different kinds of charities, businesses, all kinds of things, brand marketing, that kind of stuff. But I guess always interested in questions about identity and voice and story. That's kind of been a bit of a thread. So thinking just not just beyond the words, but the kind of the underlying story or the subtext. I was a playwright for a while, which is all about subtext as well. So I'm kind of always interested in like the level underneath stuff. So perhaps unsurprisingly, at a certain point, I decided to well, did I decide to retrain? No, let's be honest. So at a certain point, I had a bit of a kind of creative burnout slash kind of small breakdown, and yeah, kind of off the back of that, kind of retrained as a transpersonal counselor, so a psychotherapist, but looking again at this kind of bigger picture and bigger perspective. And I'm currently training as a purpose guide to help people uncover their soul level purpose. All of which sounds like quite a lot, doesn't it? And I recently started writing poems and songs. The hilarious thing is, I say all this, and I often feel like I haven't done a lot in the last few years, and I'm like, oh no, I have, and also I run a business as well as doing all those things. So yeah, I kind of keep busy, apparently. Yeah.
It's a funny thing. I think a lot of people who both who listen to the show and appear on the show
Mm,
don't necessarily have a nice, easy description that
mm,
captures everything that they do in a way that feels really resonant for them and makes sense to everyone. I'm not sure you know, it can be a fun thing to play with, but I'm not sure it's necessary always. We're kind of there's a sense that it's needed to be able to be like, yeah, this is me. It's like,
mm.
oh, this is me today. Now it's fine. I think that's it's a much more reasonable, answerable question.
Yeah, and I think, like, the fact that we're kind of all doing these like different new, we're trying, like, you said in your intro, we're doing like different and new things. So it makes sense that there isn't a kind of short, pithy way to describe it yet, because we're sort of pushing at the edges of what's kind of been before. So we don't yet have the language always to describe it.
But is there anything particular about the people that you like to work with? Is there
Mm,
anything that really yeah gives you joy in who you work with?
mm. I guess I'm really interested in like the process of change, transformation, transition, just because it's been a kind of quite a powerful thing for me. I'm kind of interested in the idea of alchemy and changing from one state to another. So I suppose I'm interested in people in working with people who are maybe facing that kind of a point in their lives and looking to go a little bit deeper and kind of beyond just the surface level, and kind of have the willingness or have the need just to kind of dive into stuff a little bit at a bit of a deeper level. But yeah, beyond that, like, yeah, I kind of, yeah, whoever comes to the right people, I really believe that. So yeah, yeah.
Lovely. And how did you come to doing this work? What brought you along? With a lot of different aspects. What made you, particularly perhaps the thing that you're studying at the moment? Or-
Mm. Yeah, well, for me, the metaphor I tend to use about my life and career is like it's sort of a breadcrumb trail. So I'm not a person who has a 5-year plan or a 10-year. I don't really have a 6-month plan. Or better if I have a week's plan, I feel like I'm doing well. Um, I'm kind of a breadcrumb trail person, and that really works for me. Like, I'm find something I'm interested in, and then like, oh, and then and then I find something else, and then I kind of just keep following these little breadcrumbs, and then before I know it, I'm like, oh, I'm in quite a different place to where I was before. But I like, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Like, so, 6 years ago, I wouldn't have even heard of the concept of a soul level purpose guide, so I wouldn't have known that it was a thing to aim towards. But through a process of kind of, yeah, just and yeah, meeting people, talking to people, like reading things, finding things, yeah. And I guess on a cosmic level, I do feel like sort of the right things have shown up at the right time, and a course has opened up or a connection has opened up. So yeah, that's true as well, I think.
I think it's an interesting. I often find it kind of connects me the planning thing and the idea of deeper purpose is that a lot of plans can often seem to me quite facile.
Mm,
They're not very meaningful very often. It's like just doing some things. It's like, well, they're not very connected. They don't feel like they have, So I think it's a really interesting thing, and it's a theme we've revisited on the show about how much you can plan meaningfully. But
yeah.
I think it's a fascinating one.
Mm. It is, and I am often struck by like the culture is about like have goals, achieve things, great, and also leave things open, allow things to shoot up that you wouldn't have thought about, because yeah, who knows what might happen.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So before we get into the main assumption and the main thing, have you got a quote that you'd like to share with us to kind of, open things up a bit? And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I found a poem which I will share for you. Bear with me a moment. So this is a poem by Hafiz, and it's this. So I sometimes forget that I was created for joy. My mind is too busy, my heart is too heavy for me to remember that I have been called to dance the sacred dance of life. I was created to smile, to love, to be lifted up and lift others up. O sacred one, untangle my feet from all that ensnares. Free my soul that we might dance and that our dancing might be contagious. Hmm.
Mm, thank you. I think it's yeah, it touches on a whole load of really. It's such a lovely thing, and for me, it's interesting to that relationship between purpose and joy really comes out in that one.
Hmm.
But how about you? What made you want to share it?
Oh, I think there's something. I think it touches on this idea that hmm, it, it's interesting. So words like purpose for me can often like lend themselves to this idea that you're on a quest, you're seeking, you're trying to find. Like there's a lot of that kind of sense of it. Like you get on your horse and you go questing. I don't know. There's some kind of like it has that sense of it as well. And joy too. I think can be the same. It's like how do I like just to seeking, searching, questing kind of mode. And I think what I like about the poem is it's that reminder of like just free me from the stuff that gets in the way, like untangle my feet so I can dance. And that sense of kind of joy and meaning and purpose sort of being our natural state, not something we have to like work dramatically hard to create. Like it's there, so it's more of an uncovering and coming back to and shedding and all those kinds of things. I guess that's what it speaks to for me.
I think for me, yeah, when you're hearing you talk about that, it makes me think of the idea essentially of earning joy.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I think that really does connect with this assumption around it that it's irresponsible to enjoy yourself. It's like, because if you have to earn it, you're spending something.
Mm.
There's this kind of finite joy that you're enjoying it now, and then you're going to suffer for it, or someone else is going to suffer for it later.
Yeah, it's kind of that. It's a very it's a scarcity thing as well, and it's like, oh, and if I have joy, then I might be robbing you of your joy because there's not too much to go around, so best be careful. Let's ration it out. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, I read somewhere recently, and I cannot for the life of me remember where, and have no reference or whatsoever to back it up. But I'm just going to share it anyway because it stayed with me. Which was there's something about how like the kind of when the land use in Britain changed and it became kind of feudal, the kind of the feudal lords encouraged this view that like you get your reward in the afterlife. Like you work really hard now, and then you kind of get your reward in heaven. And it sort of suited them to have a whole bunch of people going, oh well, life is quite hard, but I'm going to get my reward in heaven. And I thought that was kind of interesting when you think about like where these ideas come from about like yeah, like how why are we so disconnected from joy? Why does it feel like it's a difficult thing? What's the barrier? So yeah, I kind of that kind of I thought was quite interesting.
I think that the whole idea of work often is associated with very little of pleasure or joy. For
Mm,
many people, it's very much in that category, even if it's not in the afterlife. At least it's at the end of the month when you get paid,
yeah,
or the 2 weeks a year you get to go on holiday with what you've
yeah,
got paid with what you've been paid, or the thing you can buy to
hmm,
alleviate the misery.
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it very much is that kind of suffer now, save up something,
yeah.
and then enjoy it later.
Yeah, and it's almost like if you're enjoying it, it doesn't count. Like it can't be work if it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an inherent mistrust of anything that's fun, that it almost can't be valuable in the other way. It can't be productive.
Mm,
It's got a. It's funny, and it's like also in terms of personal development. I think if it isn't miserable, then it can't be good for us.
Yeah, that's true actually. Yeah, I'm just thinking about it from that personal development lens. Like, yeah, like if it's not hard, then you're not doing it right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, that it should be, yeah, we've spoken about in this assumption that difficulty is inherently valuable on the show
Hmm.
before,
Hmm.
and kind of tackled that, and it feels kind of related, um, except it is different as well. And I think for me, it's very much this. It's the there's something around this around how much we can trust joy.
Mm. Well, trust is kind of the word, isn't it? Because it's like trusting in joy and trusting in life, trusting that you're kind of allowed to enjoy yourself and that and that's okay and that no one's going to come along and tell you off and give you a detention because you were meant to be. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Trusting. How do you trust joy? How do you? I think. Yeah. One of Yeah, so okay, so again, if I think about it, even in relation to the like, I've done a lot of like through my transpersonal counseling training, through other things, I've done a lot of personal development work, and spent a lot of time in like in the shadow, in the challenges, in the struggles, in the difficulties. Like one of the hardest things to do is actually to kind of to stay in the joy. Like this is the thing. This is like one of the hardest like things for a lot of people, I think, is to allow a feeling of enjoyment without going into that what Brené Brown calls like, the foreboding joy where you're like, oh, everything's gonna fall apart at a certain point. My one of my instructors always like to sort of ask the question of like how good can you stand it? Like how good can you allow your life to be? And that the answer to that will kind of determine quite a lot about how good your life feels because we panic, when things feel too good. Oh, it's
It's
hard.
unfamiliar. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is this is a huge thing about understanding how what that as humans we're not necessarily we're more wired for what's familiar than we are for what we want.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Like, yeah, exactly. Those neural pathways will always try and lead us back down the same direction. And so, yeah, when something is unfamiliar and new, it kind of reads as quite threatening, even if it's like deeply enjoyable. It's like, what even is this? I don't know what this is.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely, and
yeah.
I think for me that and then that the idea of navigating towards it, and using it as a tool to orient ourselves is a very powerful one,
Yeah.
but it's a very challenging one. It's so I think maybe looking at the assumption that we're talking about today, um, people might not have thought, oh, that might have thought that isn't quite as transgressive as some of the other ones that we've kind of
Hmm.
covered. But actually, when you get down to it, there's something really, really just it's so not allowed that we don't even talk about it around kind of actually making your decisions on the basis of joy and actually using that as a tool to navigate.
Well, I guess that's it, and I guess because it's easy to think about, "Oh, yeah, of course I'm allowed to enjoy myself, between 7 and 9 p.m. on a
Yeah,
on a
in short,
weeknight
yeah.
and on a Saturday morning after I've done the chores and before I have to do that." So we kind of, like, we squish it into the edges. It's like it's around the sides, but the idea of, putting it at the center and, as you say, being guided by that. So that's kind of very much like where I'm the thing that I'm very interested in is like how do you navigate by joy, to the point where I actually changed my middle name. Well, I didn't have a middle name, but I adopted a new middle name of Joy because I was like, yeah, I want to put this right in the center of my name. That's how seriously
Oh,
I'm taking this. Yeah, yeah. So Marianne Joy Powell, because yeah, otherwise you forget. Like I forget. I mean, I'm super interested in this, and it's part of everything that I'm doing, and it's still really easy to forget, or it's easy to kind of yeah, slip into like, oh, well, I'll just do the thing that I always do, rather than like, actually, how can I make joy more central to everything that I'm doing? And that
hmm.
might be really good for me, and also I think that might be really good for the world, because when I'm enjoying life and in flow and doing the things that light me up, well, like that lights other people up, and that's kind of a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting um, crossover there for me. It's like, because I, as someone who has problem remembering in any
Mm.
of those ways,
Mm.
it's very much my brain doesn't really do that kind of very much at all.
Mm. Mm.
So I need the external cues to form anything like that. And there are kind of self-prompted cues, and the kind of some of the practices that you might pick up. But you're right. One of the most effective cues is other people enjoying themselves. Not
Mm.
on, not only is it a reminder, it's also implicit permission.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's funny, isn't it? I think there can be a lot of like self-judgment about, well, if I'm enjoying myself, it's frivolous, it's I don't know, it's this, it's that. We can tell ourselves a story about what it means. But if you see someone else who is just genuinely having a great time, there's something so um inspiring and kind of nourishing about that almost. You see them in their flow and you're like, oh, um, when I bought a house last year, and I got a lady rat. My fam, I'm the only person in my family who does this. I'm like the crystals person in my family. So I of course I brought round the feng shui lady, to the absolute hilarity of my Yorkshire dad, who was just like, thing what um she was so delighted to be doing her job. She absolutely loved it, and it shone through from every pore that this was like her favorite way to spend 4 hours, and I felt so kind of inspired, and like, yeah, I just felt so inspired by her enjoyment of what she was doing, that I was like, yeah, this is great.
It's interesting. I mean, I think it joins up some ideas for me around, the what it takes to be really good at being able to use your intuition to
Mm.
sort things out, to manifest things in the world, that, in
Mm.
that case, a nicer environment.
Yeah.
And I might not, I, like many of the audience, perhaps I don't necessarily fully believe in everything
Mm.
around feng shui,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
it provides, a lot of these things provide a really useful model for intuition, and to let us then use that. um, and I think it's, for me, it also gets to something around joy and being sensitive to things, and how
Mm.
much pleasure that we get, and it's related to the capacity thing that you were talking about as well. Is our sensitivity often we carry as a burden, it feels like a burden.
Mm.
But if we've got a way of expressing it joyfully, that we enjoy and others value, then suddenly it's almost the opposite. But and I think where we've had that cut off, or where that, where we've had that challenged before, it can be really, feel very vulnerable thing to share.
To share something that you feel joyful about, you mean, like, or to
Mm,
share an activity? Yeah,
mm,
yeah, um, yeah, it can, like, and that fear of, like, if you share something that you kinda care deeply about and feel invested in, then of course, like, it's riskier than if you just it's riskier than doing a job where you're like, "Oh, well, don't really care, doesn't really matter." Of course, like, that comes with much fewer emotional risks in a way. Yeah.
mm.
Mm. Hmm. But yeah, and cut off, I don't know, cut off is an interesting word, because it like, as you say that, like, I instantly, like, I feel like so much of the cut off is about, like, being in the head, not being in the body, and
Mm.
everything to do with intuition and joy and the physical sensation of joy is about, like, being embodied, which again, I don't
Mm.
think is a very it's not something we particularly get taught. It's not something that our culture particularly lends itself to at the minute. We all spend a lot, or many of us, not everybody, but many of us spend a lot of time in front of laptops, on a phone, like, just very, very up here, and very in our head about it. And actually, it's that reminder that I think anything connected to enjoyment and intuition in that way, it is like a physical experience. Mm.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point,
Mm.
that, we're not gonna really enjoy anything that we're
Mm.
not when we have to be physically disconnected for whatever reason
Mm.
to engage with it. It's
Mm.
not. It's just not possible on some level.
Yeah, yeah, I believe that. I do. Yeah. Mm.
I think for me, one of the really interesting things about pretty much all emotion, actually, but joy in particular, is I think of it as really being a tool for navigating stuff that we can't fully know,
Yeah.
and also for bringing about the possibility of things.
Yeah.
It's not so much orientated as a direct outcome, but it's much more about, it's like you enjoy the possibility of what's created. It's a marker of that there's some nice possibility introduced, some pleasurable,
Mm,
attractive possibility introduced in the behavior, rather than that you've um, um, kind of taken that possibility and turned it into something yet.
so yeah, so in that it's not about like realizing a very specific outcome or goal. Is that what you mean? It's just more about, well, I guess it makes me think sort of like, yeah, like joy breeds more joy. It's not like it's a kind of a, it's like a renewable energy. It's not a
Mm.
fossil fuel. It's not like you use it up and then it's gone. It's kind of, it's sort of the opposite. It's like if you, the more you create it, the more comes.
And
Hmm.
it's more like it's associated with those experiences. I think for me, where there is more possibility, where things are opened up.
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't mean, and the closing off is also important, because that's how we then realize the
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
it's, for me, I think it's understanding that the two kind of support one another as well, rather than separating them.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because yeah, I mean, that makes me think about how almost how useful joy is at the start of a process, and like you say, in that kind of phase of like creative energy towards something new. Actually, joy, when you don't know, when you can't know exactly where you're going to go or how things are going to turn up, like out of all the different compasses you could use, yes, there's the head stuff and there's the rational stuff, and not to throw that out because that's useful too, but yeah, like the kind of the inner compass. Like, so I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe I can kind of give a little example of that. So and because I think the other thing about navigating by joy is it's not about you constantly feel in a state of bliss and you never have any problems. For me, the best example from my own life of navigating by joy in recent years is probably like during the first lockdown, when I had a really, like, really tough time and was not enjoying life at all. It was horrible. um but my version of navigating by joy during that time was that I'd kind of picked up a guitar, just and been taking lessons for maybe 6 months before that kind of first lockdown had started, and I had an immense burst of creative energy and was writing, like, probably a song or two a week. And for me, like, that those moments of sitting with a guitar writing a song were bright spots in what was otherwise quite often quite a dark and dim and unlit kind of week. So I had all of the feelings. Like, I wasn't like walking around on some state of bliss, like some ascended master. Like, I was having a really horrible time, and the bright spot for me was I'm writing songs, and that's the bit of the week when I actually feel the best. So, and I have no idea where that's, and I still don't really have any idea where that's going. Like, I'm not writing songs because I want to achieve a particular thing, but like, I've kept doing it. I've now recorded songs, I've put things on Bandcamp. As many as like 11 people have bought them, which is like 11 more than I thought would do that. And it's really fun and it's really exciting and it's really joyful. And it would have been quite easy to say, like, oh well, like, what's the point of writing songs? They're not like, they're not my job. It's not my job. Like, no one's asking me to do it or paying me to do it or waiting for me to do it. But I, like, feel in myself like, there's something really important and powerful, and that kind of, that helped me kind of get through what was, yeah, quite a tough time, and allow me to probably, when I was then making lots of choices and decisions about where I wanted to be in life, and I did all the I moved out of London, I got a dog, I did all those things. I think having that anchor of like the thing that I enjoyed in the week somehow helped with that, I think. Mm.
Yeah. There's something interesting in that around. First of all, it comes up for me around how it can help us, how the almost engage with the more difficult stuff.
Yeah,
There's a capacity thing there, and if we experience life without joy, we actually reduce our capacity to engage with anything.
yep,
Very often we kind of need the we need that energy to be able to do that. And it feels like, one of the difficulties with that burnout cycle is it becomes this narrowing on both sides, where
yeah,
the allowable space is becomes so small as to start being claustrophobic and then start being kind of crushing.
yeah.
And that's and it, it's and we almost like by orientating just by the avoidance of things, instead of
Mm.
we seem to that seems to be where it goes.
Yeah, and there's great there's a I really enjoyed the work of a writer called Robert Fritz, and he talks about that idea of like if you like problem solving isn't actually a great approach because like as say you've got a situation that's not feeling good, like you're in a situation where you're experiencing burnout or whatever it might be, and as you start to like solve the problem and make it like slightly less bad, and then the kind of the challenge or the pain gets less intense, and then you kind of get less motivated to act to change. So you're constantly in this cycle of your problem solving it, and it gets a bit better, but then it gets a bit worse again, and then you problem solve it again, and then and it doesn't actually move you forward. And I really love what he talks about, which is about like just set the intention of where you want to go. Like don't and again, not necessarily in that kind of goals outcome way, but like based on what it is that you love, like walk towards what it is that you love, and the kind of the problems fall away. Like not and I don't mean in some simplistic way, of course there are still challenges, like life's going to throw up plenty of challenges and struggles. We don't need to they're going to happen, and that's fine too. But like the energy of being pulled towards the thing that you love the most will give you much more energy than constantly kind of firefighting and battling the thing that you don't want, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it feels like, there's also, that going back to the poem, really, that idea of entangling, and that actually
Mm,
being we think of work as this thing, this very transactional thing, whereas for me, I think that idea of the unentangling is
mm,
actually is effort more helpfully spent very often,
yeah,
um, because it allows for things I didn't anticipate.
yeah,
I think there is, joy seems for me is in kind of inherently unearned. Actually,
mm,
it can't be
mm,
joy if it's earned; it's something else. And that, but it comes about in the space. It needs the space to emerge. It's an emerging thing rather than
yeah,
a thing that we can kind of earn or be given.
yeah. Like manufacture even, yeah. And I think it kind of comes from there's something for me about like yeah, it comes from space, and it does come from attention as well, because I think it's easy to feel like I mean gosh, it's hard to talk about stuff without turning into cliche in a way, but like there's something about it's not just like the big bang moments of like the really whatever you achieve your dream of whatever that is. It like I think it is found in just like that paying close attention to everyday life, and like yeah, I guess finding joy in even quite small moments, or like becoming aware of joy in those small moments.
So what might that? I mean, I think one of the difficulties I have with is not the statement, but the fact that I find them like, well, okay, but I don't know how. So
Yeah.
is how what ways might people actually, what how could you actually do that? What might that look like?
Mm. Hmm. Well, I guess for yeah, that's a good question. So for I mean, so for me, like the things that work for me in terms of joy tend to be like kind of music, dancing, those sorts of things. Um, so I think even just on a very basic level, like if I'm feeling stuck with something, I'll put on some music and dance around the living room, and rather than kind of sitting at a laptop, like bashing away at it with all of my with the brain stuff or the kind of the head stuff, which again very useful, not trying to throw it out, but there's something about just like getting up and tangibly, like, I guess, yeah, finding a creative way to kind of to get through the day. Which, so for me, that happens to be about music and dance. For other people, it might be about art or writing or whatever it might be. So I think that can be quite helpful. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Yeah, I like that. I think for me, I again the remembering is difficult when I'm not in
Mm,
that mind state space already. I almost kind of forget what I like.
yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing for you as well, but
Yeah, and do you know, I mean, I think it can almost be as simple as, like, writing a list. It sounds really
mm,
ridiculous, but, like, write a list of things that you know you enjoy, and then kind of pick one a day and do it for 5, for 5 minutes. Like, it can be that simple. And again, it's not like do that and it changes your life and everything becomes instantly better. Like, it's not that. Like, that's not the promise. The promise is just like if you do things you enjoy, you might feel just a little bit better, and even just like the tiniest of bright spots like expands. Like it. Yeah, things might still feel really shitty around it. Like, it's not to say it's going to cure or fix anything, but it can only be helpful. And if you are feeling good, then great. Like, still do the thing. Like, add more, keep doing more. Yeah.
that's definitely a thing for me. Definitely also a thing I don't do.
Mm.
um, yeah, it feels like there is also there's when you say that, I feel something in me around like when things are bad in certain ways. This idea that I shouldn't find joy somewhere in
Mm.
that experience. That it's somehow, it's not okay. Um, in the space, yeah, there's definitely something there around that, like when it's appropriate to even to behave in such a way as to seek joy.
Well, again, I mean, yeah, I mean, here's so the example that springs to mind for that is, yeah, I think it is a challenge. Like, how, I don't know, I just have this image of like like we have all these different feelings and emotions, and they're all kind of like, they're like a color palette, and we kind of want to experience this whole, and it's not like life is, you know always black or always yellow or always red. Like, you're always kind of working with all these different colors, and sometimes the painting will be a bit more gray, and sometimes it will be a bit more blue or whatever it might be. But so for example, last year, so my mum died last year, and I went up to my hometown for her funeral, and my my dog was really ill. So I think the night before and the night after my funeral, he kind of was up in the middle of the night and needing to go for a walk at 4 in the morning, which was like, to be honest, like I kind of could have done without it at that precise moment. I was like, I don't really need to be up at 4 a.m. So I'm kind of walking around the block near my childhood home, and it reminded me of when I was kind of a bit younger, and I had this very, like, maybe like 7 or 8 or something, and I'd read in all these books about sunrise, and it all sounded very amazing. So I'd kind of tried to get up to watch the sunrise when I was about 6, but like I kind of had missed it completely because I'm not really a morning person. So anyway, I'm walking around the block at 4:30 in the morning, and I see that the sun is rising, and all of a sudden, like, I kind of have this little reframe of like, okay, well, I've always wanted to be up to watch the sunrise, and here I am. This is the gift of having to take the dog for a walk at 4:30 a.m. on the day after I've kind of been at my mum's funeral. And I guess it's, and again, I'm not saying that in some glib way of like, oh, you must always find the joy in it, like, if I'd I could have quite happily just continued to stomp around that route and been like, fucking out for, and that would have been completely fine. But like, it just came to me. The thought came to me, and it was it was helpful. Like, it helped me to be like, okay, even in this moment of deep sadness and deep grief and deep, like, annoyance at this bloody dog. It won't just do a poo in the garden like a normal dog, but has to go for a sodding walk around the block at 4 in the morning. Yeah, but yeah, that was, and it just transformed my experience for the yeah, it just transformed
Mm.
my experience.
Mm. Yeah, I think for me that arising, it's that allow it, yeah, the looking for it is an interesting one because that very quickly seems to veer into manufacturing it,
Hmm.
and also the moral judgment that you don't enjoy something. I think this is another thing actually. I have Like again, like a lot of people who listen to the show, I enjoy kind of unconventional things. I've always been quite unconventional in my interests and in what I
Mm.
did and how I express them, and kind of nerdy and also kind of slightly odd in terms of and funny connections. Like I would enjoy one thing
Mm.
um, with one group of people that was apparently not allowed in another space. I was
Mm.
in bands, and kind of in, yeah, I was also always interested in nature and
Mm.
plants and animals, and so it's like there aren't that many. It's a weird crossover, and I think those kind of that the kind of contradictory joy, almost it feels like there's a like there's just only allowed to feel a certain way in a certain circumstance. It feels like that, but actually, there's more ways to feel and be and relate and engage, and that actually does have, that can be a useful guide towards things if we want to move towards something and or actually move away from something we're not enjoying.
Mm. Yeah, well, it kind of makes me think like, you're like our what we enjoy is part of what makes us uniquely, and that's kind of where it links into purpose, isn't it? Because like our everyone has their own. So I mean, the purpose quote I always talk about is like, find the place where your deep gladness meets the world's great need, and like that deep gladness element of it is so unique and so different for everybody. Like, and I guess, there's something about like the tyranny of having to enjoy things because you're meant to, because they sound nice and they're good for you. Like, yeah, yeah, like there's nothing about, I don't think joy could ever be enforced. Like, yeah, like it's fine to hate things that other people like. You have to do it, but I don't. Yeah,
I,
like
I I think it's one of the things. It's also another thing we've touched on the show before
yeah,
is the research around how bad people are and about figuring out whether or not they're going to enjoy something.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
And that we assume it's pretty trivial and transparent about what we're actually going to enjoy,
Yeah,
and it turns out no, we're very very bad at working that out.
yeah. I think that's true. I think that's true, and I guess it's sort of, I guess it's kind of like a process of discernment, and it's kind of like it's not like a switch that you flick and you're like, oh, I'm okay, now I'm going to focus on joy, boom, done. It's more, I don't know, for me it's more like a kind of very like, and it's been the process I've been on, really. If I think about it, over the last 5 or 6 years since having a burnout, it's been like a very slow, gentle process of like, oh, I'm going to try this thing, how does this feel? This, on paper, this thing sounds like it would be something I would enjoy doing. Oh, I hate it. Okay, I don't need to do that again. Or, here's, and like just like, yeah, just kind of tiptoeing into it and sort of slowly allowing it, and slowly allowing more of the physical experience to land, because it's a lot to take in all at once. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the finding that you don't enjoy things is a big thing as well. The trying something out and then that fear around not like, "Hey, but actually this doesn't work for me." There's definitely something around that. I definitely have that. Also, partly because I a lot of my joy comes in the like early stages of something.
Yeah.
And so I tend to be done with things quite quickly.
Yeah.
Um, which is fine. And it's like, but this is what I enjoy. I don't enjoy the kind of slow final mastery. I enjoy the getting something,
Yeah.
getting like good enough at it, and then doing something else. And I think that is a challenging thing for a lot of people, and is a challenging thing. Is definitely there's some moral disapproval around that.
And I guess that's where for me it comes in, that sense of like, how do you work with, because it would be very easy to go into like, oh right, okay, so in the example you've just given there, but like it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, okay, so I need to learn how to finish things. I need to learn how to get better at mastery. Well, no. If you don't want to do that, then don't, like, find a way that works for you to, which I think you are doing and have done, which is about like, find the way that suits you. Like, don't work to what someone else's style is telling you. It really works for me to not work like to it doesn't work for me to work full time. I don't work full time, and other people can tell me you're meant to work full time. That's how you have a successful business. You're meant to do 80 hours. I'm not interested. It doesn't work for me. I don't want to do it, and I'm not going to do it. And I feel really good about that.
It's funny because I've mentioned this on the show before, how hard it is to say how many hours I work,
Yeah,
because it entirely depends on how you look at it.
yeah, yeah,
I spend the majority I spend the majority of my waking hours doing something related to
hmm,
this.
hmm.
But in terms of like work, I think actually it might be the enjoyment thing. Is that I've moved the amount of stuff I don't enjoy
Yeah,
down to being quite a small amount.
great.
And that's often what people mean by work.
Yep, yep, yep. It is. It is. Yeah, like the bit that's all the bit that sits around it, or like a lot of my work is ideas work. It's kind of coming up with a creative. Or, in the past, it's been coming up with a creative concept, and like for me, the thing that works best is like do a bit of a brainstorm, go for a walk along the river with my dog, come back. Do you know what I mean? And the walk with the dog probably doesn't look like work, but it's sort of where the thing happens.
Yeah, there's a big thing. I think the joy thing is, when we're opening up new paths and possibilities,
Yeah,
it gives us the opportunity to kind of bypass a lot of the grind, that very
yeah,
linear step by step by step thing.
yeah.
And the thing is, that is kind of there's a weird security in that. There's a
Mm,
guarantee in that. If I do this and do this and do this, I'm not sure it really is guaranteed actually, but it feels that way. And it feels, I think, part of the reason it might feel irresponsible to enjoy yourself and to take these other paths is they're not 100%. You can't know for sure, and you don't have control necessarily over
yeah.
over when the answer arrives, or what mode it is, or what it is, whether it's something that whether it's not an answer you thought you wanted. That's the other thing, I think,
Yeah.
is that suddenly sometimes it can be like, oh, right, okay. It pulls you in a different direction.
Yeah, so it's being open to what comes. So I think it's interesting that I think part of this for me is about like if you think a lot of the language of work today is like the language of machines and computers, and we talk about not having enough bandwidth and capacity and words that are quite mechanical. And if you think like a computer, if you give a computer a job to do, I don't know, how many calculations a computer can do in 4 hours, and if you give it 8 hours it will do double the amount of calculations, and so on and so forth. And I have this big thing about as humans we're more like a daffodil than we are like a laptop. Like we write sit under the mud for months and nothing really happens, and then boom, green shoot. Like it is unpredictable, and I think there's something that kind of I think there's something that gets lost in this sort of machine language and machine metaphors that we're surrounded by that we don't even notice. And actually, like for me, all of the inspiration for that kind of, or not all of the inspiration, a lot of, if I'm ever stuck with something, I will always look to the natural world for some inspiration, because I know that's where I'll find an answer.
Yeah, it's interesting how there are edges of science that are going in that direction as well, and
Mm.
we're starting to see this idea of biomimicry and
Mm.
this in things like architecture
Mm.
and material science particularly. But
Mm.
I think there's this, it's actually much wider than that, thinking about these processes. And for me, there's so much, part of the reason is because it is related to the fundamental unknowability about like the idea of having this thing where we're like, I will enjoy myself later,
Mhm.
and I will do this thing I don't enjoy now, and I will get this reward. It presupposes, first of all, that you can predict that you actually want that outcome.
Mhm.
But secondly, that the world is going to carry on behaving that way. Your environment is going to give you that specific thing in
Yeah.
that specific way.
Yeah.
And it's like, the universe is bigger than me, and it's not, it's
Mhm.
basically going to do what it wants. I don't have any
Mhm.
capacity
Mhm.
really to be able to argue or go, oh no, you said. It's like, well no, that's what I thought. It's this idea of it's there in this kind of deal with God, or this deal, this kind of these weird, and I think there is something in that about like how we're predicting, how much burden we're putting on our ability to predict, and that finding things that are intrinsically rewarding, essentially
Yep.
enjoyable,
Yeah.
is, first of all, it orientates you in this other way. And second of all, it's a really good hedge against not getting the outcome.
Yeah.
And for me, the show is partly, is like, yeah, this is on some level, this is marketing, right?
Yeah.
Like it has practical outcomes. But on another level, it's just a chance to have a really interesting conversation. And if no one else saw this and it didn't ever go anywhere else, yeah, well, it was still a really enjoyable conversation.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's such a potent protection against the not knowing what we're getting back and the transactionality, because it doesn't have to have that specific outcome then.
And this, yeah, and when and approaching someone with that spirit and intention, like it's so interesting, like because as you describe that, like I feel a sense, such a sense of like relaxation and looseness and kind of flexibility, versus like that very kind of tight, rigid gripping on. Oh, if I don't get a million listeners by next month, then I'm afraid. Like
Yeah.
and when you're having that physical experience of feeling relaxed, open, enjoying life, then that is kind of when stuff kind of comes to you, like when you're when you're in the state. This is the thing, isn't it? Like always trying to like, rather than trying to find the outcome to feel the state, find the state first. If you want more joy and peace and serenity in your life, find the thing you can do today that brings you even like 1% more of those things, and that's much more likely to bring you closer to where you want to be. If you're, and I do this. I mean, if I walk around feeling miserable, I'm like, oh well, when I get XYZ, when I get the right house, the right car, the right this, the right that, it's not going to happen. I might get the thing, I'll still feel miserable. Like, oh, it won't fundamentally change it. Whereas if I change my feeling state to be like, okay, let me bring 5% more joy into my day, let me bring 10% more joy into my day, I'm going to attract the right things, because that's I'm already feeling the state.
Mm. Yeah, and when we say attract things, it has a slightly, um, I think it's an idea that can be taken to quite um, an ungrounded level. I think for me though, there are really very fundamental psychological reasons why it actually, by being in a mode of thinking, we actually see opportunities in that direction.
Yeah.
So if we are very concerned by everything, if we're very fearful about everything, or very unhappy about everything, we see other things that will take us in that direction.
Yep. Yep.
If we are more joyful, we'll see things that can take us in that direction.
Yep.
And the difficulty is when we end up in that space of being unhappy. But I completely agree. Then it's the small, it's the where is it? It is like there must, the idea, there is never any situation where it's completely good or completely
Yeah.
bad.
Exactly.
So we
Yeah.
can work with that richness. And I think the other thing is, joy seems to derive, this is the difference between joy and happiness.
Yeah.
Is joy isn't about just being happy all the time. It doesn't actually make sense. Happiness is a weird state to want to be in all the time. Actually, it's be a bit like kind of living on candy floss or cake. I
Yeah.
think it becomes unsatisfying, and it's actually the richness of all of the the difficult stuff, or the and that all at once, for
Yeah.
me, that I think is probably what I think of as joy, being able to be in all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's, yeah, exactly. It's experience the full color palette, the full range of emotions.
Mm,
Yeah, and I think there's something. like the thing, I guess the way I like to think about it, if I think about the what you're attracting, it's like it's what you put your attention on grows. Like there's no like neutral viewpoint. You're always going to be looking at the world with some kind of a lens or another. If you're looking through a lens of fear, distrust, you'll find plenty of evidence to back. If the more you're able to kind of change the viewpoint, then the world kind of does change around you. I found this really helpful. Again, I let this as part of my counseling course. There's like a little bit of your brain that exists in order to filter information for you, um uh, like it's real, and that's kind of like, so someone explained to me, is like, like when you get a new car, like, I've got a Golf, and I as soon as I got my car, I kept seeing other Golf cars around all the time, because all of a sudden it was kind of relevant to me, and they'd always been there. I just suddenly started seeing them. So, but it's what what you put your attention on grows, and what you kind of the way that you choose to see the world will be reflected back to you. And that's not like, that's not a kind of a burden to like, oh, you have to always be happy and positive. It's not the kind of the tyranny of like toxic positivity, but it's just like, how, yeah, how can you just dial it up even the tiniest amount in the day, and see what difference that might make, and just try it and see what happens.
Yeah, I think for me, it's very much an allowing a possibility.
Yeah,
It's allowing that we might not have fully like understood everything in the situation, and I
yeah,
think that also protects against a kind of naivety that can come with following joy. Is that, yes, you want to kind of engage the world with open arms, but the world isn't always a safe place, and you also want to engage the world with open eyes. And I think that awareness of both is what allows us to do that,
yeah,
instead of the this is all good and I want this, or this is all bad and I want nothing to do with that ever, and
yeah.
I can't, that capacity to be with that complexity, with that, the ambiguous, slightly difficult feelings that aren't clear,
Mm,
feels like a lot of that, actually. And even in when I think about joyful situations, there's a kind of poignance in a lot of joy, or there's a bit of sadness or a
yeah,
loss, or
yeah,
you
yeah,
know um that's quite, yeah, there's all sorts of different mixed emotions, like the joy when I think of um being with my with my new niece, for example. It's quite a scary thing, and there's fear there, and there's all sorts of things around that aren't just happiness,
yeah.
but they are joy.
Hmm. Yeah, loss is baked in, isn't it? It's yeah, loss is baked into it, and yeah, it's part of what makes it. I guess the preciousness of like things are around forever. So like dive enjoy being in the richness of it as much as you can. Yeah.
So if people want to kind of try this out somehow in terms
Mm.
of in their own lives, well, what what small thing could you maybe would you maybe suggest people do to just give this kind of thing a go?
Um. Well, I can very quickly, if we've got a couple of minutes, I can very quickly share a little exercise that I learned as part of my
Mm,
purpose guiding. It's quite a quick one. And it's kind of like, I think it's called the finding the true spot. So you can do it, if you can give it a go, Matthew, if you're up for it.
sure.
All you have to do is, so just take a second to think of somebody that you sort of straightforwardly love, straightforwardly, uncomplicatedly. Just, you love this person. You don't have to share anything about who they are or anything. Just, this is an internal experience. And just take a second. And kind of bring that person to mind. You can picture them in whatever way makes sense to you. And just kind of say to yourself, with inside, you don't have to say it out loud, but just say, I love you. Just, or just express your love in some way that feels genuine and authentic to you. And as you do that, just notice the physical experience that you're having as you're picturing this person, and you're saying something that feels genuine and authentic to you about your feelings towards them. Okay, I'll just give you 30 seconds to do that without me chattering on in the background. Mm. So just noticing. So same person, and this time again internally, you don't have to say it out loud, but just imagining saying again the words I hate you, or some expression and something that is patently patently untrue. Just imagine saying that, and then just connect with what happens in your body when you say that. Okay. When that feels complete, if you need to do anything to complete that, if you need to just quickly visualize the person and go back to no, no, I do love you, or if you need to do anything that feels to kind of just complete and come back to the true spot, please, yeah,
Mhm.
please do that. And yeah, like I don't know, did you notice anything? How did you find that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I can feel it changing how I like both my facial expression and my posture in both directions.
Mm,
And also the like it's interestingly kind of like staying on the I love you thing is such a multifaceted thing. It kind of moves around.
mm,
Um, hate feels like it's weirdly simple thing. It's just like a one
yeah,
note thing.
yeah,
Um, so it's somehow easier to stay with on
yeah,
some level, even though it's
yeah,
quite very unpleasant. It's
yeah,
like it's easier to attend to. Yeah, it's a very strange, very strange thing to go with, and yeah, yeah, but interesting how physical, I think, for me, I can actually feel, feel both my face and my body
yeah,
wanting to adopt both of the,
yeah,
those kind of intents.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Lovely. Well, with this all of this stuff, it's just like a little exploration into kind of like testing out what feels true for you, and what is the physical sensation in the body when you say something that feels completely aligned, truthful, joyful, versus the physical sensation when you sort of say something that is, untruthful, inauthentic, and yeah, not joyful. And there might be some people might do this and they might like barely detect any sensations. That's completely fine. It's just about trying it and testing it as a way into, can I connect with the physical sensation of what happens when I know that I'm saying something that feels true and right and joyful. And then kind of just kind of keeping working with those sensations so that I can recognize them, when something comes up that actually I do really want to do and it does feel really right for me. And here is an opportunity, even if on paper it's not quite right. Actually, I'm feeling the truth thing. Okay, I'll go towards it. Or I'm feeling the untrue thing, even though it looks like it should be the right thing. Yeah,
Yeah, I think giving yourself that opportunity in all sorts of experiences, actually, you know, if you, it's almost like if you suddenly notice yourself enjoying something, is allowing yourself to pay full attention to it. Sometimes
totally.
I do that with music,
Yeah,
particularly because I found music particularly
yeah,
powerful way into this. Um, is like you'd just be kind of half listening, like listening to something, but not really listening to something, and
yeah.
then you start listening to it, and sometimes I get music often gives me the frisson, the shiver down the spine kind of thing.
Mm,
Um, and so yeah, so just finding those things and allowing yourself okay, I'm going to take a couple of minutes and actually pay attention, like give myself
yeah,
that it's not irresponsible, not a waste, not a share. It's not often the most effective way to do things as well.
yeah, exactly. And once you have that noticing of like, oh, I'm feeling something joyful. Oh, where do I experience it? What's happening? What is the sensation? Then it becomes easier to recognize, and it becomes easier to allow. And it can help to guide you in a really difficult decision, in something that feels really hard, because you start to have the physical sensation of like, oh yeah, this is what it means to
Mm.
enjoy something. Okay, great.
I think that's a lovely, lovely place to really, for people to play with and to play as it. It doesn't.
Mm.
Different ways will work with different people, and finding that thing, exploring that thing, and maybe being able to enjoy the exploration as well.
Yep.
It's not something that needs a definite answer. It's like, need to answer now. What do I enjoy? I don't know.
No, I know. Yeah, please don't unless you. I mean, if you love an Excel spreadsheet, by all means, Excel spreadsheet this. But if you don't, then please do
If
like.
Excel spreadsheets bring you joy, no judgment.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and come and work for me because I'd hate them.
yeah,
No, but yeah, like yeah, find a fun way, like create a artistic representation, like write a song, write a poem of your deepest joy. Well, those would be my things. So that's what I like.
yeah. Absolutely. No,
Yeah,
that's lovely. So if people want to get in touch with you, carry on
yeah.
the conversation, or want to find out more about, maybe do some more of this with you, how can they get in touch with you, and what ways that might
Yeah.
that work?
Yeah. So, people are welcome to find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there. I've got a mailing list which people can sign up to, and I'm sort of still in the preparation phases of launching things, but I'll be doing a soul purpose discovery program in the autumn, and I'm doing a few sort of preparatory, like introductory things, kind of between now and then. So dates are a little bit to be confirmed, but like all these ideas, navigating by joy, kind of finding purpose, like taking care of the self and taking care of the soul, these sorts of ideas. So yeah, that's
That's lovely. Yeah, I really really like it. And there's a link. There's links to your LinkedIn and to the newsletter sign up in the show notes. So I really do recommend people do kind of check that out. And if nothing else, the newsletter just provides a nice little reminder to enjoy yourself. If like me, you need that sort of thing. So, well, that sort of thing is helpful. So yeah, thank you so much, Marianne. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think, like many of them, could have gone on much longer. But yeah, thank you. And I really, really appreciate you sharing all of that with us today.
No, it's been lovely. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. And thank you very much in the audience. I hope it got you thinking. If it did, please do reach out and get in touch with either of us. Have those conversations, and share it with other people as well. It is your support that makes the show possible. Otherwise, it really is just a bare excuse for me to talk to really interesting people, and have interesting conversations. And so please do, if it's sparked anything in you, whether it feels kind of happy, sad, angry, whatever, please do, share it, explore it, and have a see where that leads you. If you are interested in other episodes, the upcoming and past episodes are all available on YouTube and LinkedIn, and will soon be available again on podcasting platforms, though still slight technical issues, which you won't be hearing if you're actually listening on the podcasting platforms, because you won't be hearing this, but such is life. Yeah, but if you do want to find us, we can search for Delightful Dissent on your favorite podcasting platform as well. The next episode, I am going to be talking to Rachel Butt, who's a creator and facilitator, about the assumption I need to help. And I think this is a good one. Again, they're kind of linked. I think there's a helping myself, helping other people thing, an over helping thing, very much related in the joy and why it's irresponsible to enjoy yourself. But I think for me, knowing when it's appropriate to help and when it isn't, how to help, how to find out how to help, are all really, really interesting areas. This idea that not all helping is helpful is a really fascinating one. And this is the 50th. This one will be the 50th episode. So I'm really, really pleased to say, this is an interesting marker that if you do enjoy something, you tend to stick with it for a lot longer than things you don't enjoy. I have very limited capacity to do things like that I don't enjoy. If I didn't enjoy this show, it definitely would not have made it to the 50th episode. So I think it's a really good marker. If you do want to do something consistently, figure out how to enjoy it. So that is going to be in a couple of weeks' time, 1 p.m. UK time on Wednesday, the 27th of April. I very much hope to see you then. But in the meantime, please do go out there and make some delightful dissent of your own. Goodbye.